I trust that many of you have seen the film, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I just actually rewatched it. It's fantastic. The humor actually is extraordinary. I'm just trying to figure out how that governor had so many children. It's just a little insane. But anyway, but when Jefferson Smith, the naive do-gooder, played by Jimmy Stewart, went to Washington, he discovered America's seat of national government was a city of rampant corruption, a place where sleazy political bosses manipulated the legislative process for their personal financial interests. Politicians were bought and paid for, and many were content to go along just so they could remain in power. Now, to be fair, decades of ethical reform have certainly had a significant and positive impact on the way Washington works. Right. These things, as we can see, are not confined to the past. In fact, in my career, was actually advanced as a result of the new rules, the transparency and accountability in government ethics that have been established over time. My first job after law school in 1983 was as legal counsel for the Ethics Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives. Imagine that. It was a committee established actually in the late 1960s after the Adam Clayton Powell affair, which is an interesting discussion. If you want to have it with me, just look for me. 20 years later, after my introduction to Washington, D.C. as a young attorney in the Capitol Hill in the ethics world, I was a United States attorney, and I led investigations and prosecutions involving bribery and other government fraud and corruption schemes. One of my cases that got a lot of attention was the bribery scheme involving Congressman William Jefferson. This is a case in which we conducted a search of his home and found $90,000 of cash wrapped in aluminum foil in a Mrs. Paul's fish box in his freezer. This is what we call our cold cash case. I'm not making this up. This stuff is too good to believe. It was a fun job, and that's when students engage in misconduct around here, I'm always feeling like that's the best part of the work I do. So while greed will always threaten the integrity of our political institutions, consider the Biden family, another more insidious force has been at work in the halls of power in the last several decades. The joint forces of the left-wing cultural elites that control academia, the media, entertainment, organized labor, and the C-suite of major corporations have imposed their so-called progressive agendas on American people through the misuse of federal power. Jefferson Smith would be horrified. President Trump is to be commended for undoing some of this abuse, but executive orders are not permanent. They can be reversed with the stroke of the next president's pen. Congress needs to act if lasting reforms are to occur. Today's conference will examine the size, purpose, and problems of the national government. With all that's happening in Washington right now, truly historic changes and reforms, this is an ideal time for us to consider these topics. 238 years ago, Gouverneur Morris, delegate to the Constitutional Convention from Pennsylvania, penned the inspiring words of the preamble of the Constitution. We remain sharply divided on how today we, the people, will form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That is the continuing work of we the people. And I hope that you will be enlightened in some way by today's conference, and that it better equips you for responsible and common sense citizenship in this great nation. So again, welcome to Grove City College. We have a great lineup of speakers. It's going to be a really interesting day. We're very thankful for you being here. It's now my pleasure to introduce one of our students, Maya, who's going to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Kengor. Maya, please come up.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maya Saracen. I'm a senior at Grove City College and a research fellow for the Institute for Faith and Freedom. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Paul Kengor. Dr. Kengor is a professor of political science at Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania, and a New York Times bestselling author. He is executive director and chief academic fellow at the Institute for Faith and Freedom. He is a longtime columnist for the American Spectator and was named editor-in-chief of the magazine in September of 2022 to succeed founder R. Emmett Tyrell Jr. He is the author of The Crusader, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of Communism, the book upon which the 2024 film Reagan is based, starring Dennis Quaid. Besides The Crusader, Kengor is the author of over 20 books, including God and Ronald Reagan and A Pope and a President, John Paul II, Ronald Reagan, and the Extraordinary Untold Story of the 20th Century. Kengor received his doctorate from the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs and master's degree from the American University's School of International Service. He holds an honorary doctorate from Princeton University. He and his wife Susan have 8 children, 2 of which are adopted. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kengor to the podium.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you, President McNulty, as well, setting the table there. I don't think I'll mention $90,000 stuffed in a fish box, right? But that's quite a story. You didn't mention who the congressman was. You could ask him about it. Did you mention it? Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. Oh, gee. Yeah. Right. So welcome back. It's good to have you all back. This is actually our 20th annual conference. And so I know President McNulty asked how many of you here for the first time. Some of you have probably been here for all 20 of them, right? So we appreciate that. For last year's conference, we dealt with anti-Semitism and the Hamas attack on Israel in October 2023. And so this is something that's considerably more uplifting than that. And what could be more uplifting than a Frank Capra film, right? It's a Wonderful Life, Meet John Doe, You Can't Take It With You, and in the 1939 Capra classic, American classic, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So as President McNulty said, it stars the great Jimmy Stewart as Jefferson Smith. And for this Western PA audience, where was Jimmy Stewart from? Indiana, PA. Indiana, Pennsylvania, right? About an hour from here, hour 15 minutes roughly, right? In fact, Bedford Falls and It's a Wonderful Life reminds me of kind of Bedford Springs right down there around the turnpike, that area. So he's an idealistic senator from the heartland sent to Washington to make it a better place. He finds out it's not exactly the kind of shining city on a hill, to borrow from Ronald Reagan's language, that he thought it would be. He seeks to bring decency back to Washington and return the country to its core convictions, the ideas of the founders. If you fast forward now to 2025, there's a new generation of reformers, if not rebels, right, that have descended upon Washington. And so the new Trump administration, some of you probably think we came up with this idea in the last few weeks. We actually came up with the idea for this conference before Donald Trump was elected in November 2024. So already we knew about the need to bring core principles back to Washington, D.C., and now all of a sudden you've got President Trump and people like Elon Musk, RFK Jr., you've got a DOGE, a Department of Government Efficiency, and they're trying to reform, if change, if not shut down, everything from Department of Education to DEI, right? You name it, USAID. So government, and we're not trying to say, somebody said to me at a conference last weekend, you're not saying Donald Trump is Jefferson Smith, are you? No, you couldn't get 2 guys who are more different than those 2. But similar questions remain, right? Government corruption, government waste, abuse, the need to bring reform back to Washington. What's the proper role of the government? Balance between local, state, federal government, between the public and private sector. So to deal with these questions in 2025, we've brought a great group here today. Michael Medved, back again. Yuval Levin, Mark Thiessen, Jay Koss, Vice President Mike Pence, Lenny McAllister, former Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett, Congressman Mike Kelly. So you'll hear from all of them about what's going on right now, but I'm going to first take you back almost 100 years, or back to early in the next century, to tell you about Mr. Smith, and especially Mr. Capra, Mr. Frank Capra. So I've got 4 points here. Here's my general outline. Tell you about Capra's early life, his immigration story, and truly rags to riches story. I mean, this is really the American dream personified. 2, we'll hit some of his major films, including my favorite, maybe your favorite too. 3, his views on government, taxes, the American founders, communism. Frank Capra was a conservative Republican, registered Republican. And then finally, 4, we'll talk about Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, dig into what Capra meant to convey with the film. And we also have 4 clips from the film as well that we'll go through. All right, so Capra's early life and immigrant story, truly rags to riches story. He came to America as a penniless Sicilian kid with peasant parents, and makes this incredible journey across the country, across the Atlantic, and then across the country in May and June of 1903. And he ends up becoming one of the greatest filmmakers in the history of Hollywood. So by the way, his own story should be a movie. I mean, somebody should do a movie about Frank Capra, which would seem like it's a wonderful life sort of story itself. So I'll start with his memoirs. This is highly recommended. Terrific book, and he opens both his preface and his intro with stories of his early life that conveys this truly rags to riches story. So very first words that he writes: I hated being poor, hated being a peasant, hated being a scrounging news kid trapped in the sleazy Sicilian ghetto, Little Sicily of Los Angeles. My family couldn't read or write. I wanted out, a quick out. I looked for a device, a handle, a pole to catapult myself across the tracks. I tried schooling, a technical education. That pole broke in the middle of my vault. I pondered other quick leaps: bootlegging, prize fighting, the ball and bat, con games. When I finally found my vaulting pole, it was not a pole at all. It was, instead, a carpet, a magic carpet, the magic carpet of film. But going back a little before that, so before he gets to that magic carpet, he was born Francesco Rosario Capra in 1897, and he opens his book by stating this. And by the way, I can really relate to this because you all wouldn't know it from my last name, Kengor, which is Polish. But my mother's 100% Italian. And so we're actually from Reggio Calabria, Calabrese, which is at the toe of the boot of Italy, right across the water from Sicily. I have my own crazy family immigration story. I don't know how much of this I should say publicly, it's being recorded, but let me just say one of the reasons I'm sympathetic to immigrants today is because of what I went through. But my great-grandfather, Pietro Giovinazzo, wanted to come to America about this same time, couldn't because he got in a fight with a police officer that he pulled a knife on in Reggio Calabria. He eventually jumps on a ship, is a stowaway across the Atlantic, and when they're getting to Ellis Island, literally jumps into the water and swims to Little Italy in New York. I don't know how he knew what to do. After that, he goes to Latrobe, Pennsylvania, gets in trouble there, changes his name. All right, eventually goes to Emporium, Pennsylvania, and then everything began there, right? But I often talk to my kids and my cousins about this. I try to mentally picture Pietro jumping into that water in the Hudson River and thinking, go, go, go. I mean, if this guy drowns, hundreds of us aren't here today, right? So those are my distinguished roots. That's it. My family didn't exactly come over on the Mayflower. All right. And my Ancestry.com test says I'm 55 to 65% Calabrian, if you can imagine that. All right, so Capra opens his book with his own crazy immigration story. He writes, "It all began with a letter from America when I was a big-eyed child of 5. This would have been about 1902. It was the first letter that Papa, and we called everybody Papa, my dad is called Papa by my kids, that my 47-year-old peasant father, Salvatore Capra, had received from anywhere. First letter he ever received. In Papa's old cracked house of stone and mortar, clinging by its toenails to the rocks in the village of Bisaquino, Sicily, the local priest read the letter to a house full of gaping relatives. Papa, Mama, 6 ragged children, Papa's 4 brothers and their families, and all of Mama's kinfolk. I remember clearly my traumatic shock on learning as a 5-year-old that not one person in my entire peasant clan could read. Nobody. That thought must have burned itself into my child's mind. I never forgot it, never lost my resentment against it. My later mania for education had its genesis in that letter at that moment. It was an astonishing letter, everyone said, unbelievable, from an unheard of place called California, Los Angeles, written by an unknown person named Morris Orsatti. The news spread. Peasants dropped their hoes and ran from the fields. They filled Papa's house, crowded into the doorway to hear the priest, the only guy in the whole village who knew how to read the letter over and over. It solved Bisaquino's 5-year mystery. It was about Benedetto, Ben, Papa's oldest son, Capra's oldest brother. 5 years ago, on his 16th birthday, Ben had herded Papa's sheep up to the poppy meadows around the hilltop shrine of the Blessed Virgin. The sheep came back, Ben did not. 5 years of novenas and lighting of candles, and not a word from Ben. Everyone mourned him as dead. Now this letter came from the other side of the world about Ben. The letter explained that Ben had ran away from his sheep, ran 30 miles to Palermo, shipped on a Greek trading steamer as a galley helper, that the ship stopped in Gibraltar, Montreal, and Boston. At Boston, young Ben jumped the ship, but 2 big policemen caught him and brought him back. The ship, this sounds like Pietro, my great-grandfather. The ship's captain watched Ben closely at New York and Havana. But in New Orleans, the whole crew tried to abandon ship. In the excitement, Ben got away. 2 days later, he lost himself among the workers in the sugarcane fields, mostly Negroes and Italians. Ben got a job cutting sugarcane. The summer was hot and thick with mosquitoes, the letter said. People died of the miasma. Ben would have died too had not a motherly Negro woman nursed him in her shack for weeks. This was Ben, Papa's oldest son. So they're reading this letter. Everybody's riveted. Wow. His health restored, the priest read on. Ben lived with his new mother as one of her many children. She brought him in to the house. He brought her his pay, and she saved some for him. On his 18th birthday, Ben asked his new mom permission to go to New Orleans with another young Italian cane cutter for a celebration. Ben and Mario arrived in New Orleans, met 2 girls, got very drunk, and were beaten senseless by 4 men with clubs. When the 2 young men awoke, they found themselves far out to sea, again on a dirty, smelly tramp steamer with some 400 other sugarcane workers, Negroes, Italians, and Cubans, all moaning and nursing bruised heads. Prisoners they were, slaves, being taken somewhere by guns. Now, Capra next goes into this long, detailed story. It's all in this long letter from Morris Orsatti about how they were basically prisoners. They were slaves taken by the Japanese on a Japanese island way off in Asia somewhere. So Ben and Mario spend a year, and they kind of ingratiate themselves to the Japanese captors. These guys end up liking them, and they eventually kind of connive a way to escape during a carnival when they get everybody drunk, and they hit a guy in the back of the head with an oar. They get on a rowboat, and they shove off out to the deep sea. I don't know how they're planning to survive at this point, right? When dawn broke, the rowboat was a speck in the middle of the heaving ocean. But blessed be all the saints, the letter said. A miracle happened. They saw a tiny plume of smoke on the horizon. It was a ship, and it stopped to pick them up, an Australian passenger liner going to San Francisco. Imagine that, right? The letter ended by relating how the ship captain had kindly let them off in San Francisco, how they found some Italian friends, how Ben joined a Southern Pacific crew laying track to the south, and how in about a year, Ben had worked his way down to Los Angeles where he met Mr. Orsatti, the guy writing the letter, a steamship ticket agent, and how delighted Mr. Orsatti was to write a letter for Ben back to Sicily with all the happy news. And Orsatti added in conclusion, if the Capra family wished to see their beloved Ben again, they would all have to come to Los Angeles because he's never going back to Sicily. All right? So what do they do, right? The family says, we got to go to America. We got to go to America. And that's the way it was, writes Capra. That's how I came to celebrate my 6th birthday, May 18th, 1903, in a howling Atlantic storm, in the Germania's black steerage hold, crammed with retching, praying, terrorized immigrants. I mean, those journeys were unbelievable. These weren't exactly, cruise ships, right? Only strong Mama had the courage to brave the wind and spray, hanging on to the deck storm ropes as she carried trays of food across the heaving deck and down the step iron stairs to Papa and 4 seasick children. Josephine was 14, Tony 12, I was 6, little Ann was 3. 2 older married girls remained in Bissaquino. 13 days of stench and misery in steerage, 2 more days of panic and pandemonium on Ellis Island. That's where, for many of us, they changed the family name, right? They just didn't even know how to communicate. Then 8 more days of cramped, itchy hardship in an overcrowded chair car, crying to sleep in each other's laps, eating only bread and fruit that Papa bought at train stops. We're so spoiled today, aren't we? I mean, it's unbelievable how pampered we are today. And finally, after 23 days without a bath or change of clothes, I mean, imagine people saying, look at these scummy people, right? Look at that's Frank Capra. That's the future Frank Capra. Our dirty, hollow-eyed immigrant family embraced the waiting Ben at the South Pacific Station in Los Angeles. Papa and Mama kissed the ground and wept with joy. I cried too, but not with joy. I cried because we were poor and ignorant and tired and dirty. None of us could read. Nonetheless, they were reunited with Ben. They drove to the Plaza Mission, where we all kneeled and thanked God for our safe trip. And then they all moved to Ben's little apartment. He writes, America, America. So with that, he adds, Papa, Mama, all the rest of the family found jobs. She worked in an olive plant 12 hours a day. He worked at a farm. His younger sister worked at a dress shop. But as for him, Frank Capra, he remembered that moment when only the priest could read. And he said, I want to go to school. I want to go to school. Everybody in his family gave him a hard time about this. You were all supposed to just go out and work as much as you possibly could. There wasn't time for school. Earn money, bring it home, give it to Mama, give it to Papa, help pay the mortgage, to do whatever you can. And he said, no, I'll do both. I'll work and I'll also go to school. He said this became a contentious argument all the time at the dinner table. They would yell, Frankie can read and write now. Time he goes to work like the rest of us. Who's going to support him? Finally, Papa put his foot down. If Frankie no ask for money, he go to high school. It's okay. So at Manual Hart School, he added 3 additional money-making chores to his regular job of selling newspapers, the Los Angeles Times. He was a news kid, right, who sold papers. 2 hours of early morning janitor work at school, Sunday night playing guitar at a Central Avenue bistro, and every Saturday night stuffed papers for the Los Angeles Times. All right, so just pausing here for a moment on this. Every nickel and dime that he earned went to the family, right? Every nickel and dime that everybody went to the family. He hadn't told anybody yet, but he also was planning to go to college, which everybody else in the family, with the exception of his father, would have vetoed. No way, you don't have time for that. So he takes on extra jobs. So I worked 6 months at the Western Pipe and Steel Plant. bucking up hot rivets, think about this, scrunched into a 36-inch steel pipe, right? Think about it, you got a 36-inch steel pipe scrunching up in there, right? Holding a bucking bar against the butt of a white-hot rivet while a riveter outside smashed its head down with an air gun that rattled your teeth. Only at noontime did I crawl out of the pipe. I couldn't straighten up and I couldn't hear. But I saved $700 in 6 months. That's a lot of money back then. Meantime, Papa was fulfilling a dream of his own. He had saved up enough money to buy a 15-acre lemon grove in Sierra Madre. Now think of all this too. This is how this is developing Frank Capra. None of this is from the government, right? This is all on your own. This is all hard work on your own. It took all the money that Mama, Papa, and Ann could scrape together to meet the yearly mortgage payment. In the meantime, he was accepted, Frank Capra, to Caltech in Pasadena as a chemical engineer. So really bright, won all these different scholarships. But Papa, he's living the American dream, right? In the meantime, Frank goes back to school. My transportation, a secondhand, single-cylinder, belt-driven Flanders motorcycle. Do you all know what those are? The kind that you started up by pushing it on the run. That was his transportation. That's how he got around. So I got another job at the Pasadena Light and Power Plant doing chores for the night engineer from 3:30 a.m. till 7:30 a.m. 7 days a week, 25 cents an hour. He gives a schedule here on this page in his memoirs. It's just unbelievable. 3:30 to 7:30, there at Pasadena Light and Power Plant, checking boiler fires. 8 a.m., I run to my first class, literally run. 11:55, ran with 4 other waiters to serve lunch at the dorm. Washed dishes, ate lunch while working. 1 p.m., run back to class. 5 to 6, glee club or football. Then set tables, served dinner, washed dishes, ate dinner. 7 p.m., jump on motorcycle, the Flanders thing that you start up, race 15 miles to Sierra Madre. Last quarter of a mile, dirt road was so steep that I had to jump off and push the Flanders. On a rainy night, it was a wrestling match with a wild steer. 7:30 p.m., backed motorcycle into shed, put paper and sticks under crankcase for bonfire in morning. 7:30 p.m. to 10 p.m., study, do homework. 10 p.m., you guys are wondering, when does he go to bed? 10 p.m., go to bed. 3 a.m., get up. Light bonfire under the crankcase. So at best, 5 hours of sleep a night. Meanwhile, his father is finally living the American dream. Papa one sun-drenched morning in February 1917, walked through his 15-acre lemon grove on the high, frost-free hills above Sierra Madre, serving his beautiful trees, dripping with large yellowing fruit. Probably felt like he was back in Sicily, but this time he owned his own property. A $5,000 crop, Papa estimated, more than enough to make the last mortgage payment, due in 2 weeks. Tomorrow he would gather up pickers to Monrovia to harvest the bountiful yield. God had smiled on him. The first 3 years he had worked the grove alone from dawn to sundown, pruning, wasting, hauling manure from the valley, hoeing so much that he couldn't straight up. No more, he told Mama, would they ever have to slave. She could quit working, Ann could quit working. I'm sure that Papa must have counted his blessings that beautiful early morning. But then, about an hour after breakfast, my 17-year-old sister Ann, the youngest and most beloved of the family, heard a strange and fearful whirring noise in the grove. She called Papa, no answer. Investigating, she traced the whir to the well pump house. She looked inside and froze in horror. Papa was dead, his chest crushed and wedged between the teeth of 2 large gears. The long black belt from the racing motor to the pump was chewed up and wrapped crazily around his body. Ann tried to claw Papa out of the gears. She tore off her fingernails, but couldn't budge him. Screaming in terror, she raced the quarter of a mile back to Mama at the house, gasped out what she had seen, and fainted. By the way, she never recovered from this. Like physically, what it did to Anne. She never recovered from it. Papa's dream of moving his family out of the ghetto and onto his beloved farm was shattered. Stunned, Mama and frail Anne forfeited the ranch and returned to Little Sicily as destitute as the day that they had arrived in America 14 years earlier. But as for 19-year-old little Frankie Capra, he made a vow that he would fulfill his father's and his family's American dream, right? So he promised his father at that point, his mother, right, Anne, that he would make them proud. So the next decade of his life is absolutely crazy through the 1920s. He's broke. He serves in World War I. No one hires him after the war, even though he's got this degree in chemical engineering. He's broke and jobless through a whole bunch of crazy circumstances. He ends up getting into film. And everyone around him is stunned, as is he, that he has this unique talent for this new medium called film. And it just happens to be right at the start of the golden era of Hollywood, the 1930s and 1940s. All right, so on that, Frank Capra's hit films, in the 1930s and 1940s, this man directed a bunch of masterpieces. How many of you have seen Meet John Doe? Yeah, not enough of you. I think that's a tremendous movie. Gary Cooper and Barbara Stanwyck, the great Barbara Stanwyck. By the way, Barbara Stanwyck, major anti-communist conservative Republican. She's one of my all-time favorites. William Brennan is in that as well. Tremendous movie. You've got to see Meet John Doe. You guys writing this down? You got to see Meet John Doe. Of course, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Jimmy Stewart, Jean Arthur, the great Claude Rains, who plays the white knight, the silver-haired senator that you'll see in this movie. By the way, what was Claude Rains famous for? Movie with Humphrey Bogart, Casablanca. He plays Louis in Casablanca. It Happened One Night. That was his first really major film. Clark Gable, Claudette Colbert. You Can't Take It With You, Lionel Barrymore, Jimmy Stewart, Jean Arthur, Edward Arnold. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, Gary Cooper, Jean Arthur. So you can see who some of his favorite actors, right? Gary Cooper, Jimmy Stewart, Jean Arthur. And then there's his masterpiece. I think it's his best film ever. It's a Wonderful Life. Anyone agree? Best film ever, right? Some of you. We were talking earlier, a couple students who had just seen Citizen Kane. That's usually listed number one. Godfather is often number two. For me, though, it's a Wonderful Life is really my all-time favorite. And I mean, every Christmas I watch it. Is Dave Ayers in here? Dave Ayers wrote a piece about this for us at Institute for Faith and Freedom last year. How every time he watches it, he cries. Can't help it. I do too. I cry like a little girl about 12 times in the course. I just even think of scenes in that movie, and it chokes me up. I'll probably get choked up talking about some of the scenes here right now. But I really think, in many ways it was one of the best films ever made. And this is interesting. Frank Capra, who was a humble guy, I mean, how could you not be humble, who came out of these circumstances? He wrote this: I thought it was the greatest film I ever made. Better yet, I thought it was the greatest film anybody ever made. Imagine that. Said that about his own film. However, he said it wasn't liked by the oh-so-bored critics and the oh-so-jaded literati. Who hated it? New York Times, of course. Bosley Crowther, the reviewer in the New York Times. The New Yorker, they snickered at what they called Capra's baby talk, especially the guardian angel stuff, right? Guardian angels. Henry Travers, who plays Clarence the Guardian Angel, God help him, has the job of portraying Mr. Stewart's guardian angel. They're making fun of it. New Republic made fun of it. Hollywood's Horatio Alger fights with more